Village Board meeting in Northfield. It is Tuesday, March 15th. It is 7 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Orth?
Here.
Trustee Whitaker?
Here.
Trustee Fowler?
Here.
Trustee Mendrick? Here. Trustee Gallen?
Here.
Trustee Dunges?
Here.
Thank you, Holly. Always a good day when we get a chance to be introduced to a new police officer and learn of an appointment, advancement in fire. Chief Hutensky, do you do the honors of introducing our new police officer?
Thank you, President Lungmas. I'm always glad to be able to welcome some new team members aboard. Officer Mackin, if you could come up here, please. This is Officer James Mackin. He joins us from the Chicago Police Department, where he worked for about 17 years and spent a significant amount of time in their community policing unit, which is really a great fit for us here. James has done a terrific job so far. We're really glad to have him on board. And I also want to thank James and acknowledge him for his military service. James was a highly decorated petty officer in the U.S. Navy. Welcome aboard.
James, welcome. As a tradition, we always get a photograph with our trustees. And great.
We get in a little tighter, guys. Perfect.
Thank you. We also have a promotion in fire. Chief Nystrand, could you do us the introduction? Come on up, Matt.
This is Matt Huebner. He works in our Public Works and Fire Rescue Department. I jotted down some stats on him so I can give you the right dates. Matt joined the village team in 2005, so he's in his 20th year here with the village. During that time, Matt has become an equipment operator, certified water operator, and a firefighter paramedic. On November 1st of 2022, Matt was promoted to the position of lieutenant with the fire department. On January 8th of 2024, Matt was promoted to PW supervisor in the Public Works Water Department. And on the 5th of this month, he was promoted to captain. Congratulations. Thank you, sir. And Matt is an awesome team member here in the village and a true asset to the village of Northfield. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Matt, thanks. Thanks, sir. Okay. Public comment at all of our meetings, we open the floor to those who would like to address the village board. We ask that you limit comment to 3 minutes.
I just have a shout out. Hi, I'm
Hi.
Ann Oak at 195 Latrobe. And well, Lila's not here, but I just wanted to thank Steve and Lila for all their help regarding the rat infestation in the cul-de-sac. They have been great in trying their best to get the chicken/duck coop owner to mitigate the rats and remove the coop permanently. To date, not me, Tom, has trapped 4 rats. So imagine what it's like to be eating dinner and seeing 4 to 5 rats at your back door. They don't scatter. You can knock on the door. You can shine light. And we have so many children in our neighborhood that play outside and pets. The stench and the filth is appalling. Unfortunately, this is nothing new with this person. But Steve and Lila have been doing everything they can to get this under control in a timely manner. We are asking the board to put in place an ordinance regarding chicken coops in the future so no other Northfield resident has to live through this nightmare. And as you know, the village has retained a rat expert, I guess you would call him, at taxpayer expense. So please consider a permitting process that outlines size, number of chickens per square foot, ventilation, noise, and sanitary guidelines. And also a setback from property lines would be a great idea, such as like how the compost piles have to be away. And also an unannounced inspection by the health inspector periodically would also be a great idea when you put an ordinance into effect. Fines need to be put in place if guidelines are not followed. And also, one warning, one strike, you're out. Otherwise, the coops come down. I mean, I don't think anybody here wants rats in their backyard. I mean, I'm not kidding. We could be sitting there and there'd be 4 of them right by our sliding glass doors. You know, you go to let your dog out, you got to worry if one's coming in your yard or into your house. Also, maybe consider to not allow any new coops to be built in the village going forward. Grandfather people in. You know, other villages around here, I think it's Skokie, I'm not sure where else, Deerfield, they don't allow chicken coops. There's nothing in our village ordinances about it. And unfortunately, it just takes one irresponsible owner to ruin it for everyone. So, but again, thank you, Steve, Lila, I'm thanking you too. I mean, they've been great, you know, so, and I think you've all gotten the pictures. So the biggest one was probably tail to nose about that big. And that's not one we trapped. So anyways, thank you. Thank you,
Thank you, Ann, for your
Steve.
comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have public comment? Yes.
I'm not going to make the same announcement I made before. My name is Kaya Rubenstein, 315 Linder Avenue. I just have a question. The sign that goes eastbound to the expressway has been down for like about 4 months. And I was wondering, IDOT probably is responsible for that. And I saw almost a couple of accidents where people weren't sure where to get off. Not a lot of accidents, or I don't walk past there a lot, but I was wondering, maybe Patrick, what's the status of that? That sign's been down forever.
I wish I had a good answer for you. We've got several signs, even in the median on Willow Road, that we've made notification to IDOT that they need to be replaced, and they've been down for months. So we make notification and we never hear back. So I don't have a good answer, unfortunately. I'll ask Chief Ninestrand to reach out to them again, raise the safety concern and see if we can get them to put that back up. But
Yeah.
we'll keep trying.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Very good, thank you. Next on the agenda, number 4, approval of bills and disbursements. May I have a motion to approve the bills and disbursements from February 1st, 2025 through February 28th, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Patrick, you want to go through the background on this?
Sure. On your list for this month are just over $1 million worth of expenditures, $1,038,470.26. It's a combination of both check register payments and employee payroll. There are several items that I highlighted starting on page 20 of your packet. There are two items there. One is for the Sauk Valley Academy. It's a charge you don't see very often. This is for our new police recruits who are going through the police academy. Chief Hutensky's done a great job locating a potential grant. So we anticipate some of that $29,000 expenditure to be reimbursed to us through the grant program. Additionally, on that same page is a purchase from Server Supply for $18,681.75. That's replacement for the, several of the switches and servers in Village Hall and the Public Works Department. Those were identified as potential security risks. So we wanted to get those replaced. It was part of our budgeted expenditure that helps tighten our system against any hacking or cybersecurity problems. And then moving to page 22 of the packet is a purchase from Target Solutions. That's a company who you don't often see in our warrants list. That's a training service that we use in the fire department. That purchase is for $6,069.90. I've been through all the purchases and recommend the board consider approval, please.
Any questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker?
Yes.
Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Trustee Mendrick?
Yes.
Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Dungus?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you, Holly. Item 5, omnibus vote consent items. Are there any items any board member would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, will the deputy clerk please read the consent agenda into the record?
There are two items in the consent agenda. The first is the approval of the minutes from the February 18th, 2025 meeting. The second is the adoption of a resolution authorizing an agreement with Zion Landfill for the disposal of soils and materials.
Thank you, Holly. May I have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda items?
Motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker?
Yes.
Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Trustee Mendrick?
Yes.
Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Dungus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Let's see, next on the agenda, may I have a motion to adopt an ordinance establishing the fiscal year 25-26 village budget? Did I miss something? Number 3, please. Number 3. Forgive me. Got it. Item 6, individual vote action items. Number 3, tonight we have Carolina Cho, who's a wetland specialist from DeWalt Hamilton Associates, and she's here to present information on the village's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Carolina, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you all a year later. This is a presentation given every year. It's related to stormwater and pollution, and the intent is it's a permit through Illinois Environmental Protection Agency with the intent to protect and remediate any pollution issues within stormwater. So the presentation doesn't look much different than last year, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet, and hopefully this works. Where should I point it? This way?
On the left side, there's a power switch. It may be off. Flip that
Oh,
up.
yes, it is indeed off. That would help, huh? There we go. So a couple examples of some pollution. Obvious ones are oil sheens and soap suds. Those are two of the most obvious pollution items that we see. Other ones include just debris buildup, so leaves, twigs, anything that could block the system from performing the way it should be. In addition to any structural issues, so things like erosion in that bottom right, and any potential pipe issues, cracking, spalling, evidence of disrepair. We also look for things like odors, colors, plant growth, flow of water. Those are all things that IPA likes to keep track of just to maintain systems of stormwater. Inspection, just an example of an inspection form from the village itself. So that is just basically checks and balances of all the items that I've listed previously. It includes some of those structural elements as well, just because even though it's focused on water quality, it's always good to keep track and inventory of your system and its structural issues. The village also keeps track of things like just numerics, so how many catch basins were cleaned, inspected, use of oil amounts. These are things we also submit to IEPA every year with the annual report. There was a NARP completed. I'm sure you've never heard that term before. Nutrient Assessment Reduction Plan. So that is related to the nutrients within waterways, specifically the North Branch Chicago River watershed. There's a survey, if anybody's interested in taking it and giving their opinion on the Nutrient Assessment Reduction Plan itself. That is available, so I thought I'd throw that up there. Who knows if somebody might be interested in that. But basically, that's a plan put in place by the Watershed Work Group that's very active, especially in Lake County. Its intent is just to reduce the amount of nutrients, excess nutrients within the North Branch. So it's got a good purpose. If anybody is interested, that's where you can find it. I can make my PowerPoint available. Otherwise, the permit itself was supposed to be renewed back in 2021, and by renewed, I just mean that they refreshed the language, add some new parameters. That's done every 5 years, or is supposed to be. It has not been since 2016. As of late, this is the message on IEPA's website that it was supposed to be renewed in 2024, March of 2024. Has not yet been, but whenever they do release that, we will update the Stormwater Management Program Plan, which is basically a plan indicating the village fully intends to comply with all the new requirements in that permit. So we'll keep you on the edge of your seats with that. We'll see if they ever get to that. Last I heard is that, just a side note, EPA recently moved buildings in Illinois, and they made a public comment at some conference that they just found the permit in a moving box. So that's the status. So who knows?
I had a quick question. The stormwater, the stormwater drains, the signage that goes in there, the green and blue signs, is that something the village does? Is that MSD? Who puts those signs by the drains, let people know not to dump oil and waste in those drains? Because I see them all over the place. Is that you guys?
It was Go Green Northfield.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not sure because I.
No, it's great.
Because I know there was a lot of tags that were, there were a lot of tags.
But that's
Thank you.
great. Those kind of signs are great. Public education, so.
Any other questions for the board? Carolina, thanks again for being here. It's
Yeah.
always good to see you.
Yeah, see you next year, yeah.
Any questions or comments from the public on this? Do we need a vote on this? Just information, great. All right, next item, may I have a motion to adopt an ordinance granting a special use to allow the operation of a fitness facility known as APX Training Systems located at 314 Hap Road.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Steve, can you give us a little background?
Thank you, President Longmus. APX Training Systems is seeking a special use to operate a 1,293 square foot training facility at 314 Hap Road. The Plan and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the special use at this point, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you may have of staff. Mr. Stalnecker is the owner of APX Training Systems and is here to answer any questions you might have for him.
Great, do you mind approaching? Yeah. Very nice to meet you. And,
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's, is this new to the village? You're brand new to the
It
village?
is new to the village. The business is not new. Right now, I'm in Northbrook.
Yeah, well, welcome.
Thank you.
Wish you great success in the
Thank you.
village.
Yeah.
You know the location there. Any questions from the board?
How long do you think before you'll be up and running?
The goal is April 14th, so quick turnaround.
Terrific. Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Thank you for being here.
All right.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker? Yes. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Trustee Mendrick?
Yes.
Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Denges?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Great success. So this evening, item number 5, this evening we're conducting a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget. So we'll be entering into a public hearing right now. We're going to have a hearing within a board meeting. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker?
Here.
Trustee Fowler?
Here.
Trustee Mendrick? Here. Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Dinges?
Here.
So we have a quorum for this public hearing at 7:20 PM. Manager Brennan will provide an overview of the budget and then we'll open the floor to questions. Patrick?
I'm excited to see so many people here just for the budget. This is fantastic. So for those of you who were here during the last earlier meeting in March, there'll be a little bit of repetition, but I'm trying to keep it fresh for everybody so it remains as interesting as possible. To the extent possible, anyway. There we go. So this budget process for us last many months began actually near the beginning of the year, and the most public-facing part of it really started in January as we're working through our goals and objectives as we start to build the current fiscal year budget, which begins on May 1st, 2025, runs through April 30th, 2026. In concert with that, we are always looking at how we're doing in the current budget year. Are we meeting revenue projections? Are we exceeding expenditures? And then this is a time when we're pushing department heads to do estimates for how much money will you have expended by April 29th and how are we doing on revenues. So these two processes run concurrently during the year. Additionally, you see the list there. I won't read the whole thing to you, but this evening is the budget hearing. This process is really an opportunity for the public to weigh in on the budget, to offer any comments to make sure that this is a very transparent process. But one of the questions you may have is, why budget? You may or may not budget at home. Well, for us, it's legally required. We have to have a budget. It could be a multi-year budget, but we have to have something adopted that allows us to appropriate or spend funds. There are a lot of good reasons to have it. You see the list here. It's fiscally transparent. The residents know where their funds are being spent. You heard me talk earlier about the warrant list. That's another part of your process, that we put a listing of it. It's a check register of where checks are issued. On that list, we list the starting check number and ending check number. It's a way for the board to be able to know, did we skip check numbers? Is there a possible problem there? All that is interwoven into the budget process because those expenditures need to be accounted for in a particular line item. It's also our roadmap to figure out, are we achieving the goals that the village board set for us during the budget process? And how are we doing financially? Are we able to just survive this year financially? Or as we look out in the future years, are we doing okay, or are we spending more in a particular year than we have the means for? It really all comes forward into a best practice for us of how to be fiscally transparent and make sure that we're fiscally stable using the residents' tax dollars. And personally, for me, that's one of the most important pieces is people are paying direct dollars out of their pocket through property taxes to us. And we have a fiduciary duty to do our best, make the best use of those funds, and be wise with those funds. This budgeting process helps us do that and stay on top of things, as well as have the information out so people know what we're doing. As I mentioned on March 6th, a local government budget is very different than your home budget. We have part of what's called fund accounting, in that we spend money within certain funds. Some things have to be separated out, but our main working day-to-day fund is called the general fund. And that's what we'll spend most of our time in this hearing with me explaining. But there are several other funds, and I'll give a quick highlight of those as we go forward. So, as I said, the general fund, that's our star of the show, if you will. That's where most of the financial activity happens on our day-to-day operations. The table you see before you is a pattern, or it shows a history from fiscal year 2020, so May 1st, 2019 to April 29th, 2020, revenues versus expenditures. In that year, we brought in $186,000 more than we spent. These are audited numbers. The next year, we spent $191,833 more than we brought in. The year after, we're over $1 million to the good. And as you look at that, and when I looked at it, I thought, what happened there? Because that is a really big difference. Well, really, it was the time when the county, because of COVID, delayed the timing of property tax bills going out. Additionally, they're putting a new computer system in. And the delay in the property tax bills had a significant impact on the village about when revenues came in. So that change meant in '21, we didn't get the revenues we were anticipating, but in 2022, there was a catch-up process that put us over on budget. You see the current fiscal year, we anticipated spending almost $1.9 million more than revenues coming in. For those of you who have been in this meeting, you understand that was a budgeted transfer to the Capital Projects Fund. The board consciously is spending more to shift those funds in the Capital Projects Fund, because as we look out into the future, we see we've got a lot of expenses coming, and the board is being fiscally responsible by saying, let's transfer that to capital so we don't have big problems coming up with these other expenditures. That takes us to the last set of columns on your right, which is the fiscal year 2026 proposed. That's what's before the board tonight for the ordinance adoption. The budget as presented shows a positive balance of $43,000. It's pretty tight when you look at a $14 million budget for us to be looking at just $43,000 in the positive. The department heads and I have been through this extensively, working through both expenditures and revenues. It's the best projection we have right now. There's some things in there that make me uncomfortable about some of our revenue estimates, but I think based on the information we have right now, that's the most accurate budget we can present for you. And I promise you, we will continue to monitor that as the year goes forward. So let me show you some different views of the budget. So rather than just me sitting here running numbers at you, let me give you some things that give you a better idea of how this is doing. This is the general fund, that main day-to-day operating fund I mentioned, and this is where our revenues come from. As a village manager, I look at this pie chart and I want to do the Snoopy happy dance. This is a great thing, and the reason being is you see your revenues are split almost equally between three primary areas. The orange cell on the left is property taxes. So about 40% of the revenues we receive every year comes in through property taxes. I will tell you in my last community, that ranged between 73 and 76%. So that town was heavily reliant on property taxes. Now that's good and bad. It's good because it's a stable revenue source. It's what we call an inelastic revenue source. It's pretty stable, you know it's going to come in year after year. It's bad because it means that the residents are funding the lion's share of the expenses that we have. So the intergovernmental revenues you see here at 40% is almost perfectly balanced with property taxes. Those are things like home rule sales tax, PPRT, personal property replacement tax. The revenues coming in from outsourced areas, people spending money in town, the state sending us shared revenues. And the last category you see is that mix of pie slices on the north, what I'll call the other category, and that is about 20%. You're near equally split in three different areas. It is a beautiful thing because it gives the village stability. Now, the downside is those intergovernmental revenues, and to some extent, the 20% on the top, those are elastic revenue sources. So if we enter a recession, if we have a bad year and nobody's buying automobiles, that revenue source can shrink, and we don't have the same stability that a community with a 76% reliance has. However, it's really good for your property tax rates because it means the village has done things over time to diversify its revenue sources, to rely more on businesses to help support that and ease the burden on taxpayers. So for me, this is, I'm sure you look at this and go, yeah, nice pictures, Patrick. It really is. There's a lot of information here that makes me happy about your revenues and how you've been doing things over time. Before I move on, and maybe I just want to leave this up for just a little bit more, but do you have any questions about this? Okay. So the next one, we've just talked about revenues. Let's look at expenditures. And this is our expenditures by category. Part of our budgeting process is we look at wages go in one category, contractual services are in a different category, transfers are in a category. So these are the big categories we use for our budget to see where are the majority of our funds being spent. It goes of probably no surprise to any of you that half of our spend in the general fund is on wages for staff. Those are the people providing these services to meet our objectives on a day-to-day basis. Benefits in the top left slice is 24% of our expenditures. That number, when I saw it, was high. It is high. The target typically for your fringe benefit costs is 12 to 16% of your wages. So why are we at 24%? Well, the number you see there kind of slightly hidden at $1.6 million, that's our annual expenditure for the police pension fund. So 48% of that 24% is police pension expenses. The board is doing a good job funding that amount correctly. The state's put a requirement in that we get fully funded by 2040, and this is the cost to the village to get to that full funding target we have. But that's also why you look at a quarter of our expenditures overall are in employee benefits, but really you look at it, it's much less than that when you back out that $1.6 million for police pension. To give you a comparison, our IMRF bill for our staff is about $350,000. So a large difference there, but it's truly trying to get us caught back up on our obligations for the police pension fund. $2.5 million for contractual services and interfund transfers. That's a number that's very elastic. It changes year to year. It was just over $2 million in transfers last year because of that one-time transfer. This year's back closer to our norm with $926,000. So once I get the big picture of all those categories, I then start looking at the departments. How are we doing department-wise? Well, this is administration and finance. Here we combine both the finance department and administration, where my office is, into one category. You see the splits there, 33% for wages, 10% for benefits, contractual services. We charge a lot of the ongoing contractual services into the administration fund. So you see that number at 52%. For example, Kathleen works for us through an outsourced accounting firm. Her time is billed through a contractual service category because she brings more value coming in as that contractual service for us. And you see the other splits there. So this pie chart, if you will, is very common for what I would typically see in a group. You see the benefit category about 10%, which honestly is a little bit lower than what I typically see in fringe benefit costs. Moving on to community development, 46% of that department's charges are wages, 15% for benefits, contractual services, so engineering services. Items like that come through with community development are charged at 36% of the total expenditure for the department. Police department, wages 46%, benefits 36%. That has in the police pension costs charged to the department. Contractual services are $761,000. And interfund transfers. You'll see that in every department on charges. This village does a really good job projecting what the expenses are for equipment. So the police vehicles, they expense out and depreciate over time. And the finance department calculates what amount should we be setting aside every year to fund that next police vehicle that'll last 5 to 6 years. So that transfer of $315,000 is going into the capital fund to set money aside, so when it's time to replace a police car, those dollars are there. When it's time to replace a fire truck, the majority of those dollars will be there. It avoids us having to go in and borrow funds to do those replacements because you're very proactive in your budgeting for these expenditures. Fire rescue, 68% in wages, 11% in benefits. Contractual services, $265,000. That represents things like shared fire services, reaching out for Red Center for our dispatch service, all come in that category. Interfund transfers, very similar to police in the amount of $352,000. And Public Works, that department also run by Chief Nystrand is a 44% wages, 17% in benefits. Contractual services is a bit less in that area at 16%. So I mentioned that that was our general fund. We've got a number of other funds in the village. I will not bore you with pie charts for all those funds, but I just want to give you an idea. One of the larger operating funds we have, excuse me, not operating, but expenditure funds, is a capital improvement fund. That's the fund that the board goes in before the budget development process and talks about the big projects for the area. You see before you a listing of some of the major projects within the capital projects fund that are planned for the fiscal year 26 budget. One of the biggest in there you see is a west frontage water main. That water main is being purchased, if you will, from the capital projects fund. That is because the water fund doesn't have enough revenue on a year-to-year basis to be able to fund a project of that size and still keep an adequate fund balance. So the capital projects fund will purchase the water main, have it installed, and if you will, gift it through the magic of Kathleen and her department to the water fund as an asset that will start to depreciate that amount down. The water fund is getting to the point where we'll have enough assets on hand to be able to fund another large water main project in the area of $1 million, $1.3 million, but it may be another year or two before we get to that point. Luckily for us, there's no shortage of water main projects the chief would like to get done, so we will be coming forward probably with a Hap Road water main project in fiscal year 26 to get that replaced. Here's a table that shows the other funds that are that we haven't discussed. All these funds are positive with the exception of the capital improvement fund. Remember, I said that we transferred additional dollars in. The village knew there'd be expenditures coming forward, so the net on the capital improvement fund is a loss of $180,000, but we just transferred in nearly $2 million additional funds. So we're drawing down on that savings account, which is something the village anticipated. MFT is motor fuel tax fund. That's a restricted revenue fund that we have to use for things like road resurfacing and repairs. We get money through motor fuel tax dollars. Every time somebody purchases gasoline in the village, we get a portion of that back through taxes. Police pension fund you see listed there, and foreign fire is one you don't hear much about, but everyone who has homeowners insurance has a small tax on their insurance rate. That gets sent in to the village fire department. They have a separate body, the Foreign Fire Insurance Fund, that looks at those revenues, makes decisions on the needs of the fire department, and can fund special projects and often help the firefighters get things that we may not ordinarily be able to fund or wouldn't typically fund. So that's, we've just bookmarked an $18,000 expenditure for that group. We'll see what they come up with during the year for the needs of the fire department. Sorry, I'm ripping through this information because I see so much excitement in everybody's eyes. So if you have any questions, just please let me know. Okay, this chart, I'm guessing, is brand new to you folks. And I want to start getting you used to seeing it because as we work through on things, this is one of my favorite pieces of information. And this is your debt service obligations. And this is a chart that shows how much in property tax dollars every year residents are paying to pay off bonds. So the top purple one is a Series 2016 bond. In 2016, you issued a bond for road repairs, water main repairs, sidewalk improvements, a number of projects. You're paying about $178,000 in property taxes every year until 2030 on that bond. December 1st, 2030, you will have fully paid off that amount. Generally, 10 years after you take a bond out, it could be called, meaning you could refund that bond and reissue it. I look at your interest rate at 1.8%. Based on today's market, you could refund that in 2016, so next year. I probably won't be coming to you saying, hey, let's refund that, because in today's market, that bond would probably be in the ballpark of 4%.
2026.
So, thank you, 2026. Just checking to make sure you're listening. Stacked underneath that is the Series 2017 bond. So the next year you issued another bond. It could be called in 2027. It's at a 2.4%. It's interesting that 1 year later, the rates on your bonds went up that much in just a year. So timing of when you issue bonds is a really important thing. That bond drops off in 2032. And at that point, you'll have almost $490,000 that will not be on the property tax levy, assuming you don't do anything before that. The reason I bring this chart to your attention is that as we're looking out long-term for the village, we're looking at what are our needs, are we going to have to issue bonds for any major projects, and the timing of the debt. Because if I'm going to recommend to you that you issue debt, I'm going to try to do it in a way that it doesn't increase property taxes. So I look at this timing and go, well, we've got to keep things going through 2030, because I don't want to come forward with a recommendation if we need something until we see that dropping off. And that keeps the tax burden for the property taxpayers not increasing in that expenditure category. So every year during either and/or the time when we issue the tax levy or the budget process, you're going to start seeing this chart for me as a way to keep it in your mind of what our debt service is, because sometimes it's easy to forget that that's something layered into your standard tax levy. That's it for me. I'm sure that's probably the most exciting part for all of you that I'm done. Item 6 is your ordinance for fee changes. The fiscal year 26 budget anticipates 2 fee changes. One is an increase in the water rate. The second is an increase in the engineering services fee to pass through our costs. The second is the ordinance. If the board's ready, you can adopt the budget tonight. Everything has been advertised, placed, and all of our timing has been met for you to adopt the budget as presented. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great job, Patrick. Really great graphics. It's really helpful. Any questions from the board for Patrick? There's got to be some. No, you covered it nicely.
My goal was to put everyone to sleep so there would be no questions.
Any questions from the public? Excellent.
I'm still processing forward after Patrick's presentation. I think one thing that you just mentioned is the rate increase for water. And I think just for the public to know, we're not arbitrarily raising water rates because we want to. We're raising our water rates to match what Winnetka is raising their water rates to charge us.
That is correct. And as I mentioned, our water rate right now doesn't bring in enough revenue to fund the projects that need to happen in that fund. So really, every year you're taking from the general fund in property tax revenues and shifting funds over the capital fund to be able to do water. So you're supplanting the water fund, but this is a pass-through of 3.9% of increase from our water purchase rate.
Thanks, Tom, for pointing that out. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a question. I don't know if it's the right spot for it, but just as a follow-up for last time about the electric vehicles and what information you found and if that impacts the decision of what the board might want to do in terms of the registration fees.
Why don't we do that at manager's comments? We'll bring that up towards the end of the meeting, if that's all right. Let's stay on task here. We are in the middle of a hearing. But if there are no other further questions, could I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
I already asked the public if they had any comments. Did I get a second?
Second.
Terrific. Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
I declare the public meeting closed at, Mallory, what time do you got?
7:43.
7:43. Thank you, everybody. Great job, Patrick. All right, moving on. Item number 6. May I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending Appendix D, Article 1. This is related to something that we just talked about. Appendix D, Article 1 of the Village Code as it relates to the water, sewer, and engineering service fees.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you very much. Patrick, do you have anything further to add to this?
No, just happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the public? Any further questions from the board? Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker?
Yes.
Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Trustee Mendrick?
Yes.
Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Dinges?
Yes.
Motion carries.
So item number 7, if we're ready, we will adopt the budget tonight. May I have a motion to adopt an ordinance establishing the fiscal year 25-26 village budget?
So moved.
Second.
So this ordinance adopts the fiscal year 25-26 budget. That was the subject of our public hearing. Any further questions from the board before we do this? Go ahead, Tom.
I hate to throw the monkey wrench in, But I recall having a conversation about the paying for engineering for the parking lot, or potential parking lot in the near future. And it's still in the budget, but I can't really remember how that was left off of talking about trying to save some money where we could. And there were some thoughts shared by the board about whether or not we should still press forward with the engineering. And I just was wondering, did I miss something, or there was conversation about pulling that out?
Patrick?
Sure. So when we had talked about our goals and objectives, there was discussion about whether or not we really want to do that. Is the timing right or not? And it was a consensus of the board at that time to proceed with trying to get the lease, but to not budget any expenditures for the actual construction of the lot. At the March meeting, there was also a question about, should we be putting that money in there or not for the engineering services at all? I didn't read a consensus of the group of changing what you had already put in the goals and objectives. So we kept it the way it was. There was a request also during the process to see if we could find $10,000 for signage for downtown, to identify the downtown or the business district area. Kathleen did some work, and recall I was talking about some tells in the budget, some things that just didn't look right that we investigated. And we found that there were some charges going to the general fund that should have been going to the water fund for personnel services. Those changes were made and were listed in your packet that put us at the $43,000 positive, inclusive of an additional $10,000 transfer from general fund to capital projects fund. So that being my long way around of saying those dollars are still in there for engineering services to work with IDOT. It's my recommendation, if the board's comfortable, that you continue to allow that to happen, because I have IDOT's attention. There's nothing that says that once you get the permission for that lease, you have to either sign a lease or start any construction. But it would be nice if you ever anticipate using that parking lot, using that area for a parking lot, that we get IDOT out of the way, as bad as that sounds. We get their concurrence for Cook County, that Cook County can issue us a lease for that lot. Because right now, IDOT has the first right of refusal for Cook County's use of that parcel. And that's where IDOT kind of got their hook in this process.
But just as a little follow-up to that, because I just want to make sure that we're getting $28,000 worth of value, can we engineer a parking lot there now, or will we need additional space? Because we did have the discussion with some of the local businesses, like, can we do it? I mean, or is that what the engineering is going to tell us?
Sure. The engineering set aside is really more for stormwater flow and management to prove to IDOT that the proposed lot will not cause an increase in the amount of stormwater running off into the Edens and increasing flooding. As proposed, it actually reduces the amount of water going to the Edens. You can get a parking lot there. You can get access to the lot. And there's something we haven't really talked much about, but the village has an easement across the Byline Bank property. So basically from Walnut, directly behind Metamorphosis, there is a swath of land that is an easement for us that could go right back in the back of that parking lot.
And is that included in the engineering, that piece you're talking about?
Right now, there's no engineering needed for that piece. It is something we have. We're going to make sure it's recorded so there's no doubt that that's in existence.
Okay, thanks.
So that easement would basically be an alley access to the parking lot if we built it?
Correct.
And then typically when we have leases with Cook County or the state, what are the terms? 10, 20, 30 years? What are we talking about typically?
You know, IDOT puts generally a 5-year lease or limit on their leases, but this would be a Cook County lease. So we're proposing that this permission from IDOT lasts for the anticipated life of the parking lot should we get to that point. So we're going to try to get an extended permission, if you will, from IDOT. But Cook County, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have such a limit on how long they lease it. For them, it's a piece of parcel that's not being used that technically they should be maintaining and aren't. So it'll be a less liability for them.
What's the fee agreement as far as the lease, or is it just a lease that we have with them and there's no fees that we have to pay to the county?
You know, we really haven't gotten to that level. My personal anticipation is it would be a zero-cost lease, or $10 a year for that de minimis amount. But because we haven't cleared the IDOT hurdle, we haven't started discussing terms of the parking lot.
Thank you.
Well, I think you sealed my question and my thoughts, but I just want to confirm once more. I know the one concern about putting parking back there was a limited ingress egress, because there's that pretty narrow alleyway between Canvasback and Metamorphosis. But if there is a potential off of Walnut here, that totally changes
Good circulation.
the circulation of that lot. So thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions for Patrick? Any questions from the public? I guess we're ready. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker?
Yes.
Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Trustee Mendrick?
Yes.
Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Dingus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Holly. Next, moving on, may I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending Appendix C of the Village Code with regard to the model codes?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Steve, you got a little background on this.
Sure. At the January Committee of the Whole, staff presented a group of updates to our family of safety codes. Those are the building codes, the fire safety codes, plumbing code, HVAC, et cetera. And the board was of a consensus were amenable to the changes that staff presented in January. So at the direction of the board, staff has drafted the ordinance that you have in your packets to adopt those updates as we discussed. Kudos to Holly for putting together that 30-page ordinance document for us. It was a lot of work. And unless you have any other questions, that's it.
Any questions for Steve on these model codes? No. Any questions from the public?
I think I have a comment,
Okay.
and actually regarding number 8, because one of the discussions in there was about home fire sprinklers.
Yep.
But maybe I should hold my comment till I see whether it gets approved.
Sure.
So I'm going to, sorry, I'll wait till after we make, however it goes.
I'll double check. Any questions from the public? Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Orth?
Yes.
Trustee Whitaker?
Yes.
Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Trustee Mendrick?
Yes.
Trustee Gallen?
Yes.
Trustee Dingus?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know we talked about this at our meeting when this was initially brought up. We received a letter from someone who wanted to come speak in opposition to this code. It's going to sound a little corny, but I think as a board, adopting this code tonight is probably one of the biggest accomplishments that we could do for our community in supporting residential sprinklers. I've done a lot of research on it, and it's a win-win for everybody. It's reduced the risks for our firefighters, police officers. It increases property savability and lives as well. So I think it's a monumental thing that we're approving tonight. I appreciate that it's been brought to us, and I think most of all, I can say that I was part of the board that approved it. So thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Trustee Whitaker. Moving on to item 7, department reports. The department reports are provided in your packet. Do the trustees have any questions related to these reports? Mallory, any updates that you wish to add?
Not at this time.
Patrick, reports from the village manager's office.
Sure, I see a few faces in here now that weren't in the earlier meeting, so just a quick update. The proposed construction project on Sunset Ridge Road, we heard today from Cook County that they're pushing back the start date to the 31st. We have explained that we would like to be involved in the process for meeting with the contractor to talk about what the impacts are to the residents, and we hope to have more information to share very soon. Melissa sent out information to the residents today about that, so they'd be aware. And it's difficult for us. It's a Cook County project within the village, and it's going from, if I remember right, Lake Avenue all the way north to Skokie Boulevard. So it's a huge project in our town, but not our control. So we're going to try to stay as involved as we can and make sure our voices are heard.
Yep, thank you. Trustee Gallen, you had a question for Patrick.
Yeah, just at the last meeting, we were talking about the electric vehicles and the possibility of a reduction for the registration fees, and you were going to see if you could figure out what that percentage actually was or the total numbers. Do you have any information about that?
Yes, I have an update. Kathleen went through the records. I had believed that all electric vehicles have an EL license plate, ends in EL. She pulled a number of those out. We have about 10 that are confirmed by model to be fully electric vehicles. However, not all license plates were EL, but they also weren't personalized tags. I've done some more research and learned that in 2023, the state stopped requiring all electric vehicle license plates to be EL. So it's harder for me to get the total number. Additionally, I learned that the state has decided to charge electric vehicle owners extra for their vehicle registration renewal because they don't pay motor fuel tax. So they put a surcharge, if you will, of $100 on as a way to start making back some of the funds that electric vehicle owners are not contributing to the motor fuel tax. So my best guess now is 10 for sure, plus whatever may have been purchased since 2023 in the village. Your universe there, rough guess, is probably not more than 25 vehicles in the village.
So it's a small number. Is there like any appetite from the board to have that fee reduction?
Anybody want to comment?
I wanted to ask a question. Did that surcharge that you mentioned, is the state passing that on to municipalities in any way, or is it staying in the state coffers? I know the answer. I'm just going to ask anyway.
I hope it is being diverted to the motor fuel tax fund is probably the best answer I can give you.
Okay.
I don't know for sure.
So Matt, let me just ask you, what the idea here is, the genesis of the idea is to incentivize people to buy electric vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but also just sort of having a green and sustainable goal as the village. And that is one small thing that we can do right now.
Anybody else have any comments?
You know, Matt, I know we've talked about this one, but I think if it's a small number and we can do it and further a green goal, and it's a dozen or two, I would be in favor of maybe even no filing at all. See, you got me. Took 3.5 years, but you got me on this one.
Let's see if we can give Patrick some consensus on this while we're talking about it. Anybody else have an opinion on this?
I don't think when you're talking about the $50 I pay for a vehicle sticker, I don't think that's going to incentivize anybody to get an electric vehicle. And like we talked about before, they don't pay motor fuel tax. They're using the same roads, they're heavier, so they also damage the roads as much or more than regular vehicles. I don't see that as an incentive, and I think everyone should be paying their fair share if they have a vehicle that's licensed in Northfield. And it's very difficult right now. We've had issues, you can ask the police chief, enforcing that, and you can ask our finance director too. We don't get 100% compliance with that. So any solid revenue source that we can get to continue to pay, and we're in a tight budget year, every dollar matters. So I don't think it's prudent to give them a pass on paying for a vehicle sticker that I don't think the $50 is going to make a difference with someone buying an electric vehicle versus a gasoline vehicle. I don't see it. Yes, you can be green, that's awesome, but I don't see that, we should be giving them a pass for a vehicle sticker. And we've talked about this every year for the last, 3-4 years.
Charlie, well said. Tracy, do you have an opinion?
Honestly, I like the idea of having some sustainability initiatives in the village. I'm just not sure that this is the one. I was hopeful that you would say it was a lot more cars than it actually is. So it's a token gesture, and I think if we really want to have more sustainability in our village, not unlike the water bottle refillers, I'd rather focus on things that we can do there versus saving somebody, 10 people in the village, a little bit of money on their expensive car.
Now I need to hear from everybody. Tom, do you have an opinion?
I think, I agree that we shouldn't adjust, but what I would really like to see is us looking at, and maybe this might incentivize people in Northfield to get electric cars, is look at electric charging stations for vehicles, whether we put some at the village hall or library, post office, or something like that. I think one of the disadvantages here in Northfield is there's no public vehicle charging stations. So I think that would be more putting our efforts into looking into something like that would be way more worth our time.
Okay. Todd?
I concur with Tom. I think
Yep.
that's a good idea. Place to start. And I understand Matt's passion for this. I think it has to be, to Tracy's point, it's got to be a little bit more encompassing instead of just one thing.
Thank you. Well, I think we'll re-examine this again next year when we set the sticker prices.
And I would agree with the other trustees about electrical vehicle charging stations or solar power, things like that. I think that's a great idea and a great move forward in showing that we want to be a little greener and providing that people can have those locations.
Okay.
During the break, I was looking at a grant opportunity that may be able to fund an electric vehicle charging station. It's a little self-serving. It would be nice to put something, we are a charging desert, if you will. There's not much in the area, but if we get something in close to the business district, that may bring more people to town, get people to spend more money and bring in more tax revenue. So I'll investigate that and see if I can bring some update to you soon, because I'm seeing consensus that you'd like to see something like that in town.
And I think there's a few at the car dealerships, aren't there right now? Aren't there a couple of car dealerships?
They are, I'm
that
not
have-
sure, my
The
vehicle
public
is,
can't use those, though.
yeah, my vehicle's a,
Walgreens got them though, too, I think.
mine's a plug-in, so it's a hybrid. And I've never been sure whether or not I could just go there and charge or not.
Okay.
So.
I know, I'm sorry, and not to put you on the spot. Does Walgreens still have their charging stations, or are they gone?
They're gone.
Yeah, okay, so they're gone. They were there, but they're gone.
Well, I know that ComEd has some programs, and what Patrick's alluding to is these programs, and I think we should look into that. I think it's a great idea.
Also, it would be worthwhile to encourage the landlord of the Mariano's property when that changes over to perhaps consider putting in charging stations, because you often see them at grocery stores because people are, in a store a bit longer. So, I mean, it's a wish list, right? Something we could encourage them to consider.
I saw Steve writing it down.
I think there's different property owners we could approach as well
Sure.
as Friedman. But one last thing, really quick, so we don't forget, because it's fresh on the table, is can we give staff direction into potentially looking at ordinances and addressing the issues that were brought to us tonight regarding rodents and chicken coops and,
Sure.
I mean-
Only, what I'd comment on, it's just the only, I know this is ranging, is that Northfield has a, and Tom, you know this as well as Charlie and I, since I've been here since '62, has a kind of a rural roots to it, right? And, the fact, I always thought it was kind of cool that you could, the only farm animals that are prohibited are pigs. Otherwise, horses, I mean, I grew up, there were horses on Briar Lane, and I had 2 horses, and but I understand completely what the concerns are and the problems that they ran into. Maybe we got to strengthen our ordinances so that it's more penal so when there's violations, when there's problems.
or some sort of
I-
guidance to conform to.
I certainly support that, because I had a new neighbor move in behind me at my previous home and decided to put ducks and used part of my fence as their enclosure, and I really had no recourse. And it does bring in other animals that are preying on her ducks because she didn't keep them caged correctly. I understand the residents' concerns over there.
Yeah, sure.
So I would certainly like to consider something.
Well, and also property size matters. If you have a lot bigger lot, like then it's a little easier. I mean, if someone's got horses and they're on, you know, a larger piece of property, or even
That's
some of the
maybe-
animal things.
Maybe that's one of the keys.
Right.
In certain zoning codes, it's, when R1, it's allowed, and R6, it's not. you know?
What about when we had the pigeons, the carrier? Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, what was that? What finally, Steve, you've been there that long, right? When they had the,
That was
come
bad.
on, really?
I will tell you from our perspective, your current property maintenance standards have enough of a hammer for us to deal with this property maintenance issue. If you want to do something to limit what foul residents may have in their property, I would bifurcate, I would separate those two issues. We have what we need to deal with the problem now. If you want to get into that discussion, let us know and we'll give you some potential guidelines for that. But I will caution you that every time I've seen this come up in a village, it has been a highly controversial topic, highly
And
controversial.
that's dealing with it right now.
Yes, on both sides. So if this is a reaction to the current problem, right now, we think we have it. And if we don't, we'll come tell you. If this brought to your attention something else you want to limit, that's a different issue, let us know and we can start to work on that.
So should we just, do you recommend taking kind of a wait-and-see approach?
Personally, I would put it on the new village board after to see if they want to do it.
I'll second that.
It's gonna stir. Nicely
All right.
done.
Perfect segue. I think it concludes our business for this evening. May I have a motion, a second to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody, for being here.